Chapter 8. Fleeing the Ashes. The sun dipped beneath the bruised horizon, casting long shadows over the thatched roofs of Elara's village. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and fading summer blooms, a fragile peace that had already begun to unravel. In the distance, a low guttural growl rolled across the fields, a sound so unnatural that even the birds ceased their songs. Elara's sharp green eyes scanned the horizon, a tight knot of unease coiling in her chest. Her hands, steady from years of healing, trembled just slightly as she clutched a bundle of herbs, a feeble defense against the creeping blight. The rot was no longer just an affliction, it was a living, breathing force, and tonight it was coming for them. The first scream shattered the stillness. It was a child's cry, raw and piercing, rippling through the village like a stone thrown into a still pond. Elara's heart lurched. She sprinted toward the sound, the pounding of her boots on dirt mingling with the cacophony of chaos erupting around her. Flames licked hungrily at the wooden walls, casting flickering shadows that danced like specters on the smoke-choked air. From the edge of the forest surged the Blight's twisted spawn, grotesque creatures birthed from corrupted flesh and magic. Their bodies pulsed with the same dark glow that had seeped into the earth itself, eyes gleaming with malevolent intelligence. These were no mindless beasts. They moved with purpose, hunting, destroying. "Elara, help!" a voice called out. She twisted, spotting Mira weaving through the destruction, her small frame clutching a wounded villager. The apprentice healer's face was streaked with soot and tears, but her eyes burned bright with determination. Elara reached a crumpled figure beneath a shattered roof, a small child, barely breathing. The girl's skin was pale and mottled, marred by the telltale black veins of the blight. With trembling hands, Elara pressed cool water to the child's lips, whispering soothing words that felt hollow against the roar of destruction. "Stay with me," she pleaded, but the child's eyes fluttered closed, a soft exhale slipping free. The world seemed to tilt as Elara's grief crashed over her, raw and unyielding. Behind her, Mira's voice cut through the smoke. "We have to move! More are coming!" Kalen appeared then, his broad frame blocking the path of a snarling creature. His scarred face was set in grim resolve as he swung his blade, buying precious moments for the survivors to flee. "Now, Elara, we can't stay here." With a final glance at the smoldering ruins of her home, Elara gathered Mira's hand. Together, with Kalen at his rear, they plunged into the shadowed forest, the cries of the fallen echoing behind them. The night wrapped around them like a shroud, the silence between the rustling leaves heavy with loss. Yet, within Mira's grip, Elara felt a flicker, a fragile spark of hope. As dawn crept over the horizon, the trio found refuge in a hollowed glade. Elara sank to her knees, exhaustion pressing down like a weight. Yet even in the depths of despair, a resolute flame burned within her. "We'll find a way," she whispered, voice raw but steady. "For them, for everyone." Mira nodded, her youthful face set with new courage. "I'll help you, Elara. We'll make sure their deaths weren't in vain." Kalen stood sentinel, eyes scanning the broken land, a silent vow etched into every line of his scarred face. The road ahead was uncertain, shadowed by grief and danger, but together they would endure. For the blight was not just a plague to be healed, it was a force to be understood. And Elara's quest had only just begun. The ashes of the past were cold, but from them new life could yet rise.
Chapter 9. Arcane Revelations. The air inside the cramped chamber was thick with the scent of old parchment and candle smoke, a heavy stillness pressing down on Elara's shoulders as she stood beside Lyria. The scholar's slender fingers moved with reverence and precision, unrolling a brittle scroll that seemed to absorb the flickering candlelight. Each delicate crack of the ancient parchment sounded loud in the quiet room, as if the very walls held their breath alongside the two women. Elara's sharp green eyes fixed on the arcane symbol sprawling across the page, runes etched in ink that shimmered faintly, as though alive beneath the surface. The Blight's whispers had grown louder in recent days, threading into her dreams and waking moments alike. But this was the first time any tangible hint of the plague's origin had been revealed so starkly. "These glyphs," Lyria whispered, voice barely above the rustling of the scroll, "they speak of a ritual, an ancient weaving of magic and flesh. The Blight was born not of nature, but of hubris, an attempt to bind life to immortality through the manipulation of forbidden energies." Elara swallowed hard, the weight of the revelation settling into her chest like a stone. The Blight was no mere disease, it was a creation, a magic gone awry, birthed from the Empire's darkest experiment centuries ago. The thought sent a shiver through her, mingling dread with a flicker of hope. If the Blight had a beginning, perhaps it had an end. Kalen stood silently by the door, broad shoulders rigid, his scarred gaze restless. He shifted his weight, the faint scrape of metal against stone, the only sound breaking the tense silence. "Dangerous knowledge," he muttered, voice gravelly. "You think unearthing this will help us, or just invite more ruin?" Lyria's pale face was illuminated by the eerie glow emanating from the scroll. "These glyphs," she whispered, "they speak of a ritual, an ancient weaving of magic and flesh. The Blight was born not of nature, but of hubris, an attempt to bind life to immortality through the manipulation of forbidden energies." Elara swallowed hard, the weight of the revelation settling into her chest like a stone. The Blight was no mere disease, it was a creation, a magic gone awry, birthed from the Empire's darkest experiments centuries ago. The thought sent a shiver through her, mingling dread with a flicker of hope. If the Blight had a beginning, perhaps it had an end. Kalen stood silently by the door, broad shoulders rigid, his scarred gaze restless. He shifted his weight, the faint scrape of metal against stone, the only sound breaking the tense silence. "Dangerous knowledge," he muttered, voice gravelly. "You think unearthing this will help us, or just invite more ruin?" Lyria's pale face was illuminated by the eerie glow emanating from the scroll. "There are clues, weaknesses hinted at in the text, but the magic is volatile. To wield it risks drawing the Blight's attention, or worse, accelerating its spread." Elara's hands trembled slightly as she reached out, fingertips grazing the fragile parchment. A faint pulse thrummed beneath her touch, subtle but insistent, as if the magic itself resisted exposure. Her mind raced with possibilities and perils. Could she harness this arcane knowledge to protect her people, or would she doom them all? "We cannot ignore this," Elara said firmly, her voice steady despite the storm inside. "If there is a chance to fight back, to understand it, I have to try, even if it means walking a darker path." Lyria nodded slowly, eyes reflecting a mixture of admiration and concern. "Then we must be cautious. One misstep and the Blight could consume us from within." Outside, the wind moaned through the skeletal branches of dying trees, carrying with it the faintest echo of whispered voices. The Blight was listening, waiting. As the night deepened, Elara and Lyria pored over the scroll's cryptic verses, their voices low and urgent. Each line revealed fragments of a history long buried beneath the Empire's ruins, a history entwined with magic so potent and perilous that it had been sealed away, forgotten by all but the most reckless scholars. Hours passed, marked only by the shifting candlelight and the ever-growing shadows cast by the ancient tomes lining the chamber's walls. Elara's mind wavered between fascination and fear. The knowledge they uncovered was intoxicating, promising answers yet threatening catastrophe. At one point, Lyria paused, tracing a particular passage with a trembling finger. "Here," she breathed. "The text speaks of a counterspell, a way to sever the Blight's connection to its source, to unravel its magic. But performing it requires a sacrifice, a binding of one's own life force to the ritual." Elara's heart clenched. The cost of salvation was steep, perhaps impossible, yet the alternative, watching the Empire crumble beneath creeping rot, was unthinkable. Kaelin's rough voice broke through the silence again. "You're willing to pay that price?" She met his gaze, steady and resolute. "If it means saving those who still live, yes." The room seemed to pulse with a strange energy, the very walls humming with the power of forbidden magic. Elara felt the Blight's presence like a shadow brushing against her skin, a whisper just beyond hearing. "We move forward," she declared, "but we do so with open eyes. The path is dangerous, and the Blight will fight us every step." Lyria nodded slowly, rolling the scroll carefully and securing it beneath her cloak. "Then let us prepare," she said. "There is much to do and little time." As dawn's first light crept through the small window, Elara stepped outside into the chill morning air. The empire of Virelia stretched before her, a landscape of decay and desperation, yet also of stubborn, flickering hope. The forbidden knowledge they had uncovered was a double-edged sword, one that might save them or cut them down. She pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the steady beat of her heart beneath worn fabric. The Blight was no longer just a plague, it was a puzzle, a challenge, and perhaps a terrible ally. And Elara was ready to face it, no matter the cost. But as the wind stirred the dying leaves at her feet, a whisper curled around her name, soft and insistent, reminding her that the Blight was watching, always watching, and waiting for the moment she might slip. The chapter closed with Elara's resolve solidifying, the weight of forbidden knowledge pressing down, and the unspoken question hanging heavy in the air. How far would she go to save a world already consumed by rot?
Chapter 10. Crossroads of Trust. The cold night air clung heavily to the small clearing where Elara and her companions had made camp. Shadows flickered against the ancient trees, thrown by the unsteady flames of the fire that sputtered between the stones. The group sat in a loose circle, their faces half-lit, their eyes reflecting a mixture of exhaustion and unrest. The silence was thick, broken only by the crackling fire and the distant, eerie rustle of the Blight's corrupted forest creeping ever closer. Elara's gaze drifted from Kaelin's stoic profile to Lyria's tense fingers clutching the old, worn pages of her forbidden texts. Mira, sitting slightly apart, shifted nervously, but with a growing steadiness that had not been there before. The air was charged, the invisible weight of unspoken fears pressing down upon them all. "We can't keep wandering like this," Kaelin finally broke the silence, his voice low but edged with frustration.
The Blight spreads faster every day, and these delays will cost more lives. We need a plan, and we need to decide where our loyalties lie." Elara met his eyes, seeing the harsh lines carved by years of battle and loss. "I know," she said quietly, "but rushing blindly won't save anyone. We're walking a razor's edge between survival and destruction." Lyria's sharp blue eyes narrowed. "Survival, yes, but at what cost? The more we dig into the Blight's origins, the clearer it becomes that this isn't just some disease to be killed. It's a force intertwined with the Empire's magic itself. To fight it outright might doom us all." "And what do you suggest then?" Kalen snapped, his scarred face darkening. "We just surrender to it? Let it consume everything?" The tension escalated as voices rose, each fueled by their own fears and hopes. Mira stood silently at first, watching the clash of wills and ideologies. When the argument reached a crescendo, she stepped forward, her voice surprisingly clear and firm. "We can't just fight or flee. We have to learn, to understand. We have to be better than what we've been told. Elara's taught me that healing isn't just about curing wounds. It's about knowing when to fight and when to forgive, when to hold on and when to let go." The circle quieted, eyes turning toward the young apprentice. There was something raw and sincere in her words, a spark of something new and vital. Elara felt a pang in her chest, a mixture of pride and the bitter acknowledgement that Mira was stepping beyond the role she had carved out for her. The responsibility that had once felt manageable now seemed to expand, the future suddenly less certain but no less hopeful. Later, as the camp settled under the canopy of stars, Elara retreated to the edge of the clearing. Alone, she whispered to herself, the words a fragile tether to her wavering resolve. "What if we're wrong? What if the Blight is more than we can face?" The wind stirred the leaves, carrying faint, almost imperceptible whispers that she had come to recognize. Not threats, but questions, an invitation. The Blight was watching, waiting, but also reaching out. Kalen sat nearby, the steady scrape of his whetstone punctuating the night's uneasy calm. Each stroke seemed to carve away his past, a silent vow to protect those who still believe, even as doubt gnawed at him. The crossroads was upon them, between fear and courage, destruction and renewal, isolation and unity. For Elara, the path forward was no longer hers alone to choose. The fragile bonds of trust, the embers of hope kindled by Mira's voice, and the weight of their shared survival pressed her onward. As the first light of dawn touched the horizon, the group prepared to move again, their steps heavy but determined. The Empire outside their fragile circle continued to rot and crumble, but within, a new tension sparked, one that might just hold the promise of something beyond decay. In the heart of ruin, the fight for trust had begun anew, and with it, the fragile hope of salvation.
Chapter 11. Echoes of the Empire. The path to the ruined capital was ragged and overgrown, a silent testament to the Empire's slow decay. Elara, Kalen and Lyria moved cautiously, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of fallen leaves and creeping tendrils of the blight that snaked across the earth like living shadows. The air hung heavy with a faint otherworldly glow, an eerie light that seemed to pulse with a life of its own, whispering secrets just beyond the edge of hearing. Ahead, the broken silhouette of the capital emerged through the mist, its once proud walls shattered and crumbling, cloaked in creeping vines of dark, glowing rot. The grand gates, now cracked and hanging unevenly on rusted hinges, bore the faded sigils of a glory long lost. Elara's breath caught at the sight. This was the heart of the Empire, now a tomb of memories and ruin. Kalen's hand rested on the hilt of his sword, his eyes scanning every shadow, every flicker of movement. "We're not alone here," he muttered, voice low and taut with tension. Lyria, her pale face illuminated by the soft light of a lantern, knelt to examine the ground, tracing the intricate patterns left by the Blight's spread. "These markings, they're not random. The Blight is communicating through the land itself, a language we're only beginning to decipher." Elara's gaze drifted toward the horizon, where the sun struggled weakly against the encroaching gloom. Her heart ached with a mixture of hope and despair. The Blight was no mere disease, it was something far more complex, sentient even, and the fate of her people hinged on understanding it. As dusk settled, the group made camp beside a cluster of ancient ruins. The fire's flickering warmth was a fragile barrier against the chill that seeped from the blighted earth. It was there that old Joran awaited them, a figure as weathered as the stones around him. Bent with age, his face a tapestry of wrinkles and scars, his eyes sharp and gleaming with the fire's reflection. He greeted them with a nod, his voice a rough whisper, heavy with the weight of years. "So, you've come to see the heart of what was lost. But be warned, this place holds echoes that will haunt your steps and truths you may not wish to bear." Elara sat close, drawn to the elder's presence. "Tell us what you know, Joran. We need to understand the Blight, its origins, its purpose." The old man's eyes darkened. "Long ago, the Empire sought to bind magic itself, to wrest control from the wild forces that shaped our world. In their hubris, they tampered with powers beyond their reckoning. Ancient rites, forbidden experiments aimed at eternal life and dominion. The Blight was born from that folly, a twisted seed of magic and decay that grew beyond their control." He paused, the firelight casting deep shadows across his face. "It is not merely a plague, it is a reckoning, a force that seeks to reclaim what was lost, to reshape the world in its own image. Some say it is evil, others a guardian of balance, but all agree it will not be stopped by simple blades or prayers." Elara's mind churned with the weight of his words. Her hands clenched into fists, the urgency of her quest pressing down on her chest. The Blight was a living memory of the Empire's sins, a dark mirror reflecting humanity's ambition and failure. As night deepened, Elara wandered from the camp to the ruins, drawn by an inexplicable pull. She traced her fingers along the cracked surface of a statue, once a proud emperor, now eroded and cloaked in the subtle luminescence of the Blight. The stone crumbled beneath her touch, dust sifting through her fingers like the fading past. A chill wind whispered through the broken streets, carrying voices just beyond comprehension. The Blight's sentience was no longer a secret. It spoke in sighs and shadows, weaving its presence into every corner of the capital. Back at the camp, Kalen stood sentinel atop a ridge, his silhouette stark against the starless sky. His gaze was unyielding, scanning the horizon for threats unseen.
Beside him, Lyria spread out an ancient map, its brittle edges marked with faded runes and notes. She traced their path with a slender finger, her mind racing through possibilities and dangers. The Blight's reach is greater than we imagined. Every step forward is a step deeper into its heart. But knowledge is our weapon, if we wield it wisely. Kaelin nodded grimly. Then we have no choice but to press on, for Elara, for the people she seeks to save. The night stretched on, heavy with silence and the unspoken fears that bound them. The ruins of the Empire whispered their secrets, challenging Elara to face the shadows of the past and the uncertain path ahead. As dawn threatened the horizon, Elara returned to the fire, where old Joran stories lingered in the air like smoke. The fragile hope she carried was tempered now by the chilling truth. The Blight was a reckoning born of the Empire's own ambition, a force that demanded understanding if there was to be any chance of survival. Her resolve hardened. The echoes of the Empire were not just memories, they were warnings, and Elara would heed them, no matter the cost. But as the first light touched the blighted stones, a distant murmur rose on the wind, a reminder that the Blight was watching, waiting, and always speaking. The journey into the heart of decay had only just begun, and the true test of will and courage lay ahead, shrouded in shadows and the haunting glow of a world undone.
Chapter 12. The Blight Speaks. The air in the ruined chamber was thick and heavy, heavy with the scent of rot and earth, a scent that seemed to seep into Elara's skin, mingling with the cold sweat of anticipation on her brow. She knelt before the pulsating heart of the Blight, a mass of dark, shifting rot that glowed faintly with a sickly green light, casting ghostly shadows on the cracked stone walls. The whispered voices swirled around her like a gathering storm, soft, eerie, and impossible to ignore. They seemed to speak in fragments, words just beyond comprehension, laced with emotions raw and profound. Elara swallowed hard, her sharp green eyes fixed on the living mass before her. "I am here," she whispered aloud, her voice trembling yet resolute. "I want to understand. Why do you spread? What do you want from us?" A silence stretched, broken only by the faint, wet squelch of the Blight's slow, undulating movement. Then the whispers grew clearer, threading into a voice both alien and hauntingly familiar. It was not a voice of malice, but one of pain and longing. To live, to be heard, to transform. Her heart pounded fiercely. The Blight was not merely a disease, it was conscious, sentient, a force that had evolved beyond its origins. Images flooded her mind in a sudden surge, ancient halls filled with arcane experiments, the Empire's desperate quest for immortality, forbidden rituals that had birthed this living plague. The Blight's genesis was a testament to human hubris, a reflection of their desire to control death and magic alike. Outside the chamber, Kaelin stood sentinel, his tall frame rigid, eyes darting nervously toward every shadow. The scar over his left eye tightened as the whispering voices washed over the air, pressing against his instincts like a silent assault. He gripped his sword's hilt, every muscle taut with protective vigilance. "Elara," he called softly, voice edged with concern. "We don't know what it's capable of. Don't let it fool you." She looked back at him, a flicker of gratitude in her gaze, but also an unshakable determination. "I must try. If we don't understand it, we can never hope to survive." Drawing a steadying breath, Elara reached out her hands, trembling slightly, and placed her fingers upon the Blight's core. The mass shifted beneath her touch, cool and moist like living flesh, yet alien in texture.
A rush of sensations flooded through her. Pain, sorrow, memories that were not her own. She saw the Empire's proud towers crumble under the weight of its arrogance, felt the pulse of ancient magic that had birthed this plague. The Blight's genesis was a testament to human hubris, a reflection of their desire to control death and magic alike. The whispers crescendoed into a voice that echoed in the depths of her mind. Not destruction, but transformation, a new world born from decay. We seek coexistence, not annihilation. Elara's breath hitched. The realization unsettled her to her core. The enemy was not a mindless force of death, but a being shaped by pain and yearning, as complex and conflicted as any living soul. The lines between friend and foe blurred, leaving her caught in a maelstrom of doubt and hope. Kaelin's voice cut through her reverie, sharp and urgent. "You're risking everything. If it's a trick, it's a risk we have to take," Elara interrupted, voice firm. "Survival demands understanding, even if it means embracing uncertainty." The chamber fell into a heavy silence, the whispers now soft and almost bleeding. "Choose," the Blight murmured. "Eradicate me, and all fades. Accept me, and we both endure, forever changed." Elara's heart raced. The fate of Virelia, the lives lost and those yet to come, pressed down on her like a crushing weight. She looked once more at the glowing heart of the Blight, a symbol of decay and renewal entwined. "I will find a way," she vowed, voice steady despite the storm within, "but not through destruction alone. There must be another path." As she withdrew her hands, the green light dimmed slightly, as if acknowledging her resolve. Outside, the ruined city lay silent, shrouded in creeping rot and shadow, holding its breath for what was to come. Elara rose, her eyes burning with a new fire, a mixture of dread and determination that would carry her through the trials ahead. The Blight had spoken. Now she must decide whether to listen or to fight. And in that silent chamber beneath a fallen empire, the first fragile threads of a dangerous alliance began to weave themselves into being. The echoes of the Blight's voice lingered in her mind, a haunting melody of decay and hope, a reminder that in the heart of ruin, life's resilience could take the most unexpected forms. "We will speak again," the Blight promised, the whisper fading into the darkness. Elara nodded, her resolve hardening. The path forward was uncertain, fraught with peril and impossible choices, but it was the only hope left for a world consumed by rot. And as she stepped from the chamber, the chill of the Blight's presence followed her like a shadow, a constant reminder that the line between destruction and survival was thinner than she had ever imagined, and the true battle for understanding, for coexistence, for the future of Virelia was only beginning.
Chapter 13. Fading Light. The air hung heavy and thick, carrying the scent of rot, and earth turned sour beneath the steady rain that fell in a relentless drizzle. Elara moved through the shattered remains of what had once been a thriving village, now reduced to crumbling homes and twisted, blackened trees. Her hands trembled slightly, the faint glow of her healing magic pulsing against the darkened flesh of those stricken by the Blight. Each breath she took was labored, the weight of exhaustion pressing down on her chest like a stone. A low moan escaped the lips of a man curled beneath a shattered doorway, his skin mottled with the telltale signs of corruption. Elara knelt beside him, the comforting warmth of her magic spreading like a balm beneath her touch. "Hold on," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the lashing rain. "I won't let you slip away." But the Blight was a cruel adversary, not content with mere death, but intent on consuming and reshaping all it touched. The man's eyes fluttered open, clouded with pain, and for a moment Elara caught a flicker of recognition. A silent plea, or perhaps a warning. The whisper she had begun to hear within the sickness whispered anew, their voices weaving into the storm around her. Kaelin stood at the edge of the village, his broad frame silhouetted against the dying light of dusk. His hand rested on the hilt of his sword, fingers tightening as distant screams rose from a neighboring settlement succumbing to the same creeping rot. His scarred face was a mask of grim determination, etched with lines of past battles and haunted memories. "They come for us all," he muttered, eyes scanning the horizon. "We must be ready." Inside their makeshift camp, Lyria sat hunched over a worn table, littered with ancient scrolls and cracked tomes. The flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows across her pale face, illuminating the sharp angles of her silver hair and the penetrating blue of her eyes. Her fingers traced the arcane symbols etched into the pages, each revealing fragments of the Blight's tortured origins. "This plague," she murmured, "is no mere infection. It is a living force, shaped by the folly of men who sought to command magic beyond their grasp." Elara listened, her heart heavy with the knowledge that the Blight's roots twisted deep into the Empire's once proud history. Each revelation was a double-edged sword, a key to salvation that risked opening doors to even darker sorcery. Mira moved quietly among the wounded, her youthful face alight with a mixture of sorrow and resolve. She knelt beside a grieving woman clutching the lifeless body of her child. "We will carry their memory forward," she said softly, her voice trembling but unwavering. As the night deepened, so too did the shadows within Elara's own heart. Her bond with the Blight grew stronger, a whispered conversation threading through the silence between breaths. The Blight's voice was alien and strangely familiar, a haunting melody that beckoned her toward understanding, yet threatened to consume her very soul. The losses they endured weighed heavily on the group. Friends and allies fell to sickness or despair, fracturing the fragile unity that had held them together. Kaelin's stoic pragmatism clashed with Elara's hope, while Lyria's pursuit of forbidden knowledge edged ever closer to a precipice of no return. One night, as Elara sat alone beneath the skeletal remains of what had once been a thriving oak, she spoke aloud to the rot that whispered in the darkness. "What do you want from us?" she asked, voice raw with exhaustion and fear. The answer came not in words, but in a flood of images. Visions of decay and renewal, destruction and creation intertwined. The Blight was not merely a destroyer, but a force seeking transformation, reshaping the world in ways humanity could scarcely comprehend. Her companions would not understand this truth easily. Many feared the plague's influence, whispering warnings of corruption and madness. Yet Elara sensed that within the Blight's dark heart lay the possibility of salvation, if only she could navigate the perilous path between trust and betrayal. As dawn broke, the group gathered to mourn their last loss, the air heavy with grief and uncertainty. Mira stepped forward, her voice breaking the silence with a quiet vow to carry the torch forward. "We fight not just for survival, but for the chance to build something new from the ashes." Elara met her apprentice's gaze, a fragile spark of hope flickering within her. The road ahead was shrouded in shadows, but she would not falter. The Blight song echoed in her mind, a haunting refrain that promised both doom and possibility. The Empire was fading, its light dimming beneath the weight of rot and ruin. Yet within that darkness, Elara found a stubborn flame, a determination to endure, to learn, and to face whatever cost the forbidden knowledge demanded. The decay was not the end. It was only the beginning. And Elara would be its reluctant witness, its fierce guardian, and perhaps its final hope.
Chapter 14. Shattered Alliances. The hastily summoned council gathered in the shattered remnants of the old city hall, its grand pillars cracked and overgrown with creeping blight tendrils. The once majestic chamber was suffused with the scent of dust and decay, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows that danced eerily upon the peeling walls. Around the rough-hewn table sat representatives of the surviving enclaves, some wary, others openly hostile, each clutching weapons or talismans, their faces marked by exhaustion and distrust. Elara stood at the center, her sharp green eyes scanning the room as heated voices rose and fell like the tide. "We cannot negotiate with a plague," barked one grizzled man from the northern farms, his hands trembling with anger. "The blight is a curse, and abomination. It must be destroyed, root and stem, before it consumes what little we have left." From the opposite side, a young woman with a scholarly air, her silver hair catching the candlelight, countered softly but firmly. "The blight is not merely a disease, it is sentient, a force of nature tied to the very magic of our world. To blindly destroy it risks unbalancing what remains of our fragile land. We must seek understanding." Murmurs rippled through the assembly, uncertainty clashing with fear. Kalen, standing watchfully beside Elara, his scarred face hard and unreadable, tightened his grip on the haft of his spear. "Idealism will get us all killed," he muttered low enough for only Elara to hear. Elara raised her hand, calling for silence. "We face a choice," she said quietly but with steady resolve. "To fight blindly and risk annihilation, or to seek a path through the darkness. The blight speaks. It desires dialogue. We must listen, even if it terrifies us." Several voices protested, their fear manifesting in accusations and suspicion. Old Joran, the village elder, leaned forward in his creaking chair, his lined face solemn. "The blight was born of our ancestors' hubris. Forbidden magic twisted their ambition, and now we pay the price. Yet if the plague yearns to speak, perhaps it holds the key to renewal, or doom." Outside, the wind howled through broken windows, carrying with it the faint whispers of the blight's presence. The council's fragile peace trembled on a knife's edge. After the meeting, Elara walked through the devastated settlement, the heavy scent of rot clinging to the air. Barred doors and shuttered windows were commonplace, survival etched into every wary glance. Children huddled close to their parents, eyes wide with unspoken fears. The distant clash of steel and shouted orders reminded her that peace was tenuous. Violence waited just beneath the surface. Mira, her young apprentice, trailed quietly, absorbing the raw reality of a world unraveling.
How can they hate something so much when it might be the only way forward? Mira whispered, voice trembling. Elara placed a reassuring hand on the girl's shoulder. Fear makes monsters of us all, she said softly, but we must hold on to hope, even when it seems impossible. As twilight bled into night, Elara and Kaelin found a moment's respite beside a flickering campfire. The ruins around them seemed to breathe with the Blight's eerie pulse, shadows shifting like living things. Kaelin stared into the flames, his voice low and rough. You're asking too much of them, and of yourself. They see the Blight as a threat, not a mystery. Yet, if we cannot find common ground, the Empire will fall to chaos faster than the rot ever could. The fire crackled, a fragile beacon in the encroaching darkness. Suddenly, the tense calm shattered. From the east, the sharp clang of steel rang out, followed by cries of pain and alarm. Mercenaries, led by Captain Orin, had clashed violently with a faction determined to purge the Blight by any means necessary. The air was rent with shouts, the desperate thud of fists, and the metallic scent of blood mingling with decay. Elara hurried toward the chaos, her voice rising above the turmoil. "Stop! This destruction will only hasten our ruin!" Captain Orin, his rugged face set in a grim scowl, paused, weapon raised. "They threaten us all. Better to end this now than wait for the rot to claim us." Lyria stepped forward, her penetrating blue eyes steady. "Violence breeds only more violence. If we cannot find peace, the Blight wins not through rot, but through our own destruction." The combatants hesitated, the firelight flickering over their faces, some etched with suspicion, others with exhaustion and fear. Ilara's heart pounded with urgency. "We must find another way, together." But the fractures ran deep, and the night was far from over. As the chapter draws to a close, Elara stands amidst the shattered alliances, the weight of impossible choices pressing down. The Blight's whisper lingers in the air, a haunting reminder that survival demands more than strength. It demands understanding, sacrifice, and the courage to face an uncertain future where the line between enemy and ally blurs. Can we truly unite before the darkness consumes us all?